All right, thank you very much. I don't say this to flatter him. I say it because it's true. Arie Bucheister is truly one of the indispensable individuals who day in and day out is pressing the case for justice. I don't only say that because of his resume, because I have seen it, and Arie referenced the fact that he and I have worked, particularly in former Yugoslavia, particularly in Croatia and in Slovenia, on these issues, and he talked about the Croatian case. One of the interesting, but nevertheless frustrating difficulties that we have encountered is kind of a three-pronged problem that we confront in many places. One is the passage of time. Passage of time as we move on. Arie talked about the creation of the World Jewish Restitution Organization in the early 90s after the fall of communism in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union. And now we're 20 years beyond that, and we still have these open issues. So time passes, countries and people get on with other things, and here we are trying in the remaining years of survivors to bring some measure of justice to them. The other two issues are often used as excuses by various countries as a reason for putting off the need to either adopt legislation or to move ahead with restitution and compensation programs. One is the issue, for example, of elections. As Arie has pointed out, no country has no political party has in its platform anywhere in Central and Eastern Europe a platform, an issue relating to restitution and compensation. And so what will happen is, since there are always elections now in Central and Eastern Europe, one coming up in November of this year or one coming up in March of next year, and often we'll hear, well, you know, this is not really politically popular, and therefore maybe after the election we will get to the issue of legislation. Well, elections have come, elections have gone, and we don't have the legislation in many cases. The other issue is economic situation. Most countries will say, all countries will say, well, we just don't have the money. We don't have we might have in the boom years of the late 90s, but we don't have it now. And so between the passage of time, the issue of putting off the inevitable, we hope, and in terms of economic situations, there are these ready-made excuses, which of course we don't accept, and that's the reason why we continue to press on these issues. The reason that B'nai B'rith has been very active and very involved in all of this is because as an international organization, prior to 1939, B'nai B'rith was present in some cases in a very big way in almost all of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. So we feel that we also have, not only as Jews, but also as an organization that was very involved, very active, and present in a lot of places, the obligation to engage in this activity. So with that, we will open the floor for questions or comments. And Arie, I'd ask you to come up if you would, and we'll take the questions. Yes, gentleman in the back. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, George Baumgarten, UN correspondent for Jewish newspapers. I'd like to address myself. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of things that interested me in your presentation, for which I thank you as well. But I want to address myself to one little thing you said, which was heirless Jewish property and the value thereof, which was being used for social welfare purposes. Is there any provision, or has there been any thought of making a provision to give some of the benefits from this heirless property to local Jewish communities in places like the former Yugoslavia, which are members in now 7 countries, every one of them with a Jewish community, however small, who may be able to use this. In many cases, they're really impoverished Jewish communities? Is there any thought of doing that kind of thing?
Well, let me start with the two cases I know of airless Jewish property and then respond more directly, just so you know the background. The only country which I think has comprehensively dealt with the issue of airless Jewish property is Germany, as I referred to before. And in that case, after a period of time following the unification of the two Germanys, Germany opened the door for claims for owners and heirs of owners that had property that was located in East Germany. After that time passed, by law in Germany, the Claims Conference became what's called a successor organization. It stood in the shoes of those owners of property that just didn't exist anymore. When an owner didn't come, when there was no heir, the Claims Conference made the claim for that heirless Jewish property, and it used it for the purposes I mentioned to you. Not for any particular country, but wherever survivors were. That's one case. The other case of specifically heirless Jewish property has been recently in Hungary, where through negotiations, Hungary agreed to give a $21 million fund over 5 years as a down payment for the full value of heirless Jewish property. Whether that down payment will ever lead to the full value of heirless Jewish property and whether anything more will be given, I don't know. And those monies are used, one, for the survivors still living in Hungary as a supplement to whatever else they have. But secondly, those monies are used and administered by the Claims Conference for survivors of Hungarian origin in need who live outside of Hungary, anywhere outside of Hungary. Those are the only two cases I know. To specifically answer your question, I think it would be part of any negotiation should this get anywhere, and by this I mean negotiations leading to a particular country agreeing to take a portion of the value of the heirless Jewish property that exists and put it into a fund. I would hope it would be applied for the remaining survivors who live in that particular country. I would hope that would be part of any kind of plan.
Thank you.
Anna. We got a microphone, sure.
I'm a survivor, and I came out with the children's transport, and we find that we are the neglected children. We were paid years ago money for having interrupted our school training, but nothing else. Whatever we apply for, it's always turned down, be it hardship or whatever it is. Maybe something can be done, that you remember us. I'm 90 now, so there are not that many of us left over.
That's Yiddish? That's obviously Yiddish? That's Yiddish? Geretzt Yiddish?
Yes,
Wie kommst du von?
from Düsseldorf,
Yeah?
from Germany.
Look, how to put this? Because yours is one of a list of many who look, no one has gotten what they needed to get. No one has gotten back what they lost. No one can, all right? Let's start with that. And there are many, many who have gotten nothing and should have gotten something. But no country woke up, even the best of them. No country woke up one morning and said, "Oi, Gewalt, look what we did to the Jews, we have to do something." Nobody did that. Some were better than others in realizing a moral responsibility. Some have been awful. So what resulted was political pressure, economic pressure, a little moral pressure, leverages, and you can't come into this organization unless you do this or that. It's a patchwork. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's not a cohesive thing. So I say to you, of course, I haven't forgotten. Of course, you should be getting something. Whether that'll happen in your lifetime or anytime soon, I just don't know. I just don't know.
Yes.
I'm a child survivor.
We have a microphone.
I'm a child survivor from Budapest, Hungary. I came to this country after the revolution, 1956. I got nothing from the Germans. I was told that the Germans paid restitutions to the Hungarian government, therefore I get nothing. So there you are. Us child survivors got nothing, unless they came here right after the war, which I didn't have the privilege of doing.
Yeah, I can't speak to your specific case, but I know that, you know, there is a long list of grievances and of people who are aggrieved. And there are negotiations, we're referring specifically to Germany, more than annually, several times annually, where the primary purpose of the negotiations now, because I think the primary needs now are for home care, for survivors in need around the world. But those negotiations also address current Holocaust-related compensation programs. And there's always an effort to liberalize those, at least from the claims conference part, or to add the people who yet have not been given anything. And I know that's on the list. I don't know specifically where that is in negotiations, but all I can say to you is what I said to Ms. Deutsch, and that is basically, this is a patchwork. This is a patchwork.
Saying that she says she can get it. Other people, other groups also can get it, not just the
It's a long line. It's very hard to unwrap history, especially, as I mentioned, so many years after the events that happened.
Yes, way in the back.
Thank you very much, Arie, for your efforts. Since everything is against us, so to speak, using your words and Dan's words, time, survivors' lives, priorities, what kind of forces, internal forces, political forces within these countries that you discussed are actually for us? In other words, if there is any development in the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now, what will make it happen? Because you really convinced me that everything is against us.
Wow, what a question. That's a great question. And I think Arie, in his presentation, has really given the answer, and I gave a little bit before, too. This is a remembrance program today. And we do this not just one day a year. If we don't have programs every day, we think about it. I can tell you, I think about it not every day, a lot of days during the year. And everybody in this room does, because you wouldn't be here unless you felt the same way. Rest of the world, no. You know, Andy Warhol's everybody's 15 minutes of fame. You know, research that's been done on the concentration span of a 20-year-old today. And many of those in leadership positions in Central and Eastern Europe, who otherwise are very pro-democracy, very much for a strong relationship between Europe and the United States, very much in line with our thinking on so many issues in terms of values and shared objectives in making this world a better place and advocating for human rights and so forth, on this particular issue have a blind spot. We've encountered some people who want to help. We've encountered more people in positions, even those born after the Holocaust, who are polite. There is goodwill in some places. I've just mentioned. We've encountered people who otherwise have goodwill on this subject. Meet with us, give us the time, and we leave the room feeling, well, maybe we've made a little progress in this particular day. But we may have heard in that room the issue, let's say, about the elections. Well, you understand, if we do this now, we really want to help you, but if we do this now, you know, we will encounter problems in the elections, and the implication here is you really want us to be in, so bear with us. And that's the problem that we're facing. We are, in many cases, alone. Arie didn't mention, because it probably didn't have the time to get into the real details here, the Czech Republic, for example. The Czech Republic is one of those in the better category. But even there, the settlement was not anywhere near what we were hoping for. So not a lot of allies, certainly not a lot of advocates outside our community, and that's why, as he says, there are certain things which we need to do, which is to work every day on this in different ways, to apply pressure, to advocate, to make the case, and never to let go. We are never going to let go on this. This is not by a time certain that we will pursue this until we have every country that has committed to some kind of a program for justice for survivors, their families, and for the broader Jewish community in terms of heirless property. Yes, yes, that's it.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Javits. I worked for 38 years at the Austrian consulate dealing with restitutions and with Holocaust survivors. And I came a little late, so I don't know whether you mentioned Austria at all in the beginning. But in answer to the question of the lady from Düsseldorf, the people from Holocaust survivors from Austria, even if they left right away, if they were born 1938 and before, can all apply for pensions from Austria. They're all getting pensions from Austria. The elderly people didn't have to pay anything in. The people afterwards had to pay some sum of money, and they get pensions for the rest of their lives. I'm sure you also met Hannah Lessing, who is the General Secretary of the General Settlement Fund and the National Fund. And everybody, even, like say, kinder transport people got some money. Nothing can compensate everything, but loss of property, loss of schooling, loss of parents, passed out, everything else. So I just want to say that not only the schooling that was paid by Austria, but also everything else. Just a small comment. You may have mentioned it before I came in, I don't know, but it's my comment. Thank you.
We have time, unfortunately, for one more because, as everybody knows, across the street, the UN is having its annual commemoration, and most of us are, I believe, are going to go over. So we'll take one more. Yes.
Have you explored what you're going to run into is a lack of awareness? And have you explored some innovative partnerships? Perhaps when I went to Auschwitz, I was horrified to discover, sitting in a very fancy restaurant in the central square off Krakow, and I was horrified to discover that every single piece of commercial property that bordered that famous square was at one time, before World War II, was owned by Jews. To my best of my knowledge, not one piece has ever been returned or repaid. And there are ways you can ask this, but I think that if you were to partner with tourism programs and perhaps with educational programs, because you're going to run out of people who remember the Holocaust altogether, and they don't want to. It's ugly. Who wants to remember ugly? But I think that if you want influence, perhaps consider pairing with awareness campaigns with tourism. Believe me, there is not a country in the world that does not want tourists.
You know, we've tried to be innovative and partner, but what you mentioned are things I don't think we've actually spoken about, but are clearly things that should be considered, because nothing else has worked that well. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
I want to say one more thing about the question about allies, because it occurred to me because we were thinking about Central and Eastern Europe. We've been very fortunate that the Office of Holocaust Issues at the State Department and a number of ambassadors over a period of years, U.S. ambassadors in these capitals, have been very helpful to our effort. And I think that they stand out when compared to all of the other issues we have in terms of problems and roadblocks and obfuscation and procrastination. Having good friends in the U.S. government who have spoken out has been very important to us. Arie, I want to thank you, really thank you for all you do. Thanks for all the Claims Conference does to continue to advance the interests of survivors, their families, the Jewish community. We appreciate all that you do. Thank you for joining us here this morning. Thanks to all of you. The weather did hold off pretty good. Maybe there's something in that that brought us here together this morning. Those of you who are going over to the UN commemoration, we'll see you over there, and thank you for coming.